Hi, everyone. Welcome to this session. This is the first of two panel discussions. We have one next week as well on how far have we come with regards to SDG 5, gender equality, and where do we want to go? My name is ElsaMarie DSilva, and I'm the founder of Red Dot Foundation. We are a nonprofit based in India as well as the USA, and we work on gender equity, safety, and justice. And our main program is Safe City, which is a global tech platform called, uh, it's called Safe City, but it's crowdsources anonymous stories of sexual and gender-based violence. This is then visualized on a map so that everyone can see it. As you know, not many people report these incidents and the data is often lost. But the data is then available for communities and institutions, some of whom you will hear from, to engage with other stakeholders for stronger implementation of policies, laws at the local level, but also to work with their own communities on safer cities and safer communities programming. So, of course, SDG 5, we've been talking about it at the UN, right from the Secretary General at his opening remarks on Saturday at the SDG Action Weekend said that violence against women and girls is an age-old scourge, and that needs to end now. He called for more investment from, not only countries, but also other donor institutions on this programming. He also said without the engagement of women and girls, the achievement of all SDGs would be impossible. And you know that this is also a midpoint. They are using a lot of sports references to talk about this is the halftime where we are taking stock of where we are in the achievement of all the SDGs, not just SDG 5. And clearly it's not looking too good. But they also believe that, and all the heads of states who have been here have committed that they are going to do their best to achieve it in the second half, which is from now till 2030. I want to focus on SDG 5 because I do believe that it is very important, and leaving 50% out of decision-making processes, out of policy making is not going to help. So we are here to talk about, in particular, violence against women and girls and how in solving this problem, you can unlock the potential of all women and girls. And by default, other genders as well. Before we start, please in the chat section introduce yourself, but I'm going to ask my colleague Camilla to launch a poll just to, get us started off. Over to you, Camilla.
Thank you, Elsa. Hi everyone, my name is Camilla. I'm the Programs and Outreach Officer at Red Dot Foundation. I am super excited to be here. And as you can see, we have a poll as we're talking about SDG 5, and as Elsa said, we're in the halfway point. What do you think is needed to advance gender equality? So I see some answers coming in. I would love to hear from all of you, but I'm seeing, results so far. We have equal access to education with 23%. We have strong anti-discrimination laws with 15%. And we have, in a really leading role, we have women in leadership roles as 62% of the votes. I would leave a little bit more time for us to respond, to take some time, as I see other people are also joining us. And yeah, I think it's really interesting. We have four main questions and four main answers, and it's interesting that pay equity received no votes. So I think that's a really good way to kickstart the session and understand the perspectives of everyone. I would love to hear comments in the chat. I will be moderating the chat, so if you have any questions, if you have any comments, please feel free to use this chat section. But yeah, my first question for you would be, why did you choose the section, the option that you did? And would love to start the conversation. Elsa, over to you. We have 100% of the participants answering the poll.
Thanks, Camilla. So let's dive into the discussion directly. So we are talking about SDG 5. What have we achieved thus far? And where are we heading? And to unpack this with me is Bojan Francuz. He is one of the directors of Peace in Our Cities, which is a coalition of different stakeholders where you have mayors, you have academia, you have nonprofits and civil society trying to think of how can we reduce violence in our cities. Peace in Our Cities is really a partnership between New York University and the University of San Diego. We also have 3 Safe City partners. So very proud to introduce Maya Tamayo, who's the founder of Bayi Inc. in the Philippines. My dearest friend, Jane Anyango, one of our longest partners, who's the founder of Polycom for Girls in Kenya, and Ruxandra Sevastin, who's the program manager for one of our newest partners, Fundatia, Sensiblu, Romania. So welcome everyone. And I'm going to start with Bojan. Bojan, can you tell us, and let's pin everybody so we can see all at one time. So Bojan, can you share a little bit about your work at Peace in Our Cities, and are you pleased with where we are heading with SDG 5?
Thanks so much, ElsaMarie. It really is a pleasure to be here with you today and to be discussing with you. I see my internet connection is a little bit unstable, so I hope that you can hear me well and that there won't be any issues. If there are, I might just go off camera. But let me maybe just say, let me start from your second question, and then I'm going to tell you a little bit more about Peace in Our Cities. I think if we look at SDG 5, and if we specifically focus in on the target 5.2 to eliminate all forms of violence against women in private and public spaces. So, right, I oftentimes for shorthand say in homes and in the streets, but also including public transportation and other public spaces too. I don't think there's very little to no reason to actually be happy with the progress that's been made. We've seen, well, if we step back and look more broadly, right, the 2030 agenda is not on course. That's one thing that we know well from the scientist report that has come out just earlier this year. If we zoom in onto different goals and targets, we see that the least progress was actually made on the SDG 16, so the SDG that deals with issues of peaceful, just, and inclusive societies. But then if we zoom in on SDG 5, there's also not a whole lot of reason to celebrate or to be happy about the progress that's been made. I think in great part it is due to the pandemic that we had in the meantime, where we've seen that there's been an uptick in violence against women. There's been an uptick in reporting across the world, and that is simply unacceptable to have these high levels of violence. The thing that we need to take into the account is there's a flip side to it, and that is the fact that there has been more reporting and that there's been more attention brought to the issue, including by the local authorities, by mayors who have put on different campaigns, who have expanded access to hotlines, who have expanded services that they provide to women who suffer from violence. That's good too, right? That in light of the problem's vastness, we've also seen that there has been a mobilization and response, particularly among the local leaders, to do something about the issue. So it is on people's consciousness, but there are still more efforts and investments that need to be made going down the line. Let me then respond very quickly just to say, what is Peace in Our Cities and who do I represent? Not quite the director yet, ElsaMarie, but we are one of the co-managing organizations of the Peace in Our Cities. And Peace in Our Cities is a network of 23 cities around the world and about 40 community-based organizations, all of them who are committed to reducing levels of violence in their cities through human rights-informed approaches. We work with them to provide them with best practices, to connect them with each other, to connect them with experts, and connect them with resources in some instances to innovate in how they're doing that. And I know we're going to be talking more about concrete examples on how some of our cities have been reducing violence against women later down the line. So let me start there and looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Bojan. And, you know, Red Dot Foundation is a very proud member of Peace in Our Cities. And what I love about is the learning, peer learning. We share good practices and we learn from each other and we test it out in our own parts of the world. So with that, I'm going to ask Maya to share what she thinks about where we are with SDG 5. And you work with a lot of women in politics. So why don't you tell us, because that's like, a good segue into your work.
Yes, thank you, Elsa. Good evening to everyone. Good morning to the other part of the world. So yeah, maybe I'd like to start also to introduce Bayi Inc. So we are a women's organization, and our vision is actually an ecosystem of transformative feminist leaders at the subnational level. So our strategy is actually capacitating elected women officials, mayors, vice mayors, councilors, on transformative feminist leadership through mentoring, sharing of lessons, learning discussions, and hoping that when we build the champions, they replicate the program at the subnational level by capacitating also young women to aspire to run for office. So having said that, I would like also to share with everyone that because of this pool of a network of women officials, Bojan mentioned about the pandemic and how the shadow pandemic was really violence against women and GBV cases were increasing at that moment. So during the pandemic, with this pool of network of women officials that we have here in the Philippines, we were able to craft local ordinances to address gender-based violence and to put in place mechanisms to still be able to respond to GBV and VAUC even during disasters and during COVID. So this was, usually we do legal reforms and policy reforms here in the Philippines for years. Like the reproductive health law was passed for, the struggle was 15 years. But during the pandemic, it took us less than a year to actually pass ordinances and local laws at the local level in cities and municipalities to address these issues simultaneously in 10 cities and municipalities. So this is unprecedented for women's movement here in the Philippines. And this is something that we're really proud of, which we actually also replicated when we partnered with the Red Dot Foundation to promote Safe City application. Well, we started with the barangay. It's the smallest unit of local unit, political unit here in the Philippines. And we also encourage barangay chief to pass ordinances to use technology in terms of reporting and addressing GBV and pandemic. And the barangay chief was able to actually, come up with strategic solutions, purposive and very focused, because they were able to get the data. In terms of SDG, I think I agree with Bojan on this one. Nothing to celebrate about. For example, but I would like also to point out that the women's movement in the Philippines have made really considerable effort in terms of legislating progressive policies, laws, and ordinances on promotion of women's rights and addressing GBV. But the problem is really implementation. And the problem also is that we don't have the data. For example, for data on VOW and GBV, we have a baseline data that we are working on, the government is working on, but we realized when we partnered with Red Dot Foundation and Safe City, we realized that the data that we have is not actually painting a full picture of the GBV cases that we have. Because when we partnered with Safe City application, for example, data that came in were generally unreported, or there were no plans of reporting it to the police or the government agencies. So the data that the government has in terms of monitoring progress on SDG is not painting a complete picture. For example, also in the political participation, we've decreased from 29% to 27% The highest we had was 2016 in terms of women taking seats in the parliament. And in 2022, we've decreased that to 27.33%. So we've never really reached the threshold of 30% in terms of quota to be able to make an impact when women, take up possessions in the government.
Thanks, Maya, for that. And I really believe that violence against women and girls doesn't happen in a vacuum. It happens because society allows it to happen. And when women are excluded from leadership positions or from high-paying jobs, it reinforces the idea that they are not equals to men. And that's why it's easier to perpetrate all kinds of violence. And like you said, Safe City provides a vocabulary to people's experiences because there's a range of different forms of violence. It's not one kind of violence. So capturing that at a disaggregated level, a hyper-local level is very important. Coming to the hyper-local level, Jane Anyango is a powerhouse from Kenya, and she's been a long-term Safe City partner. What is it on the ground in Kibera, in Nairobi, on SDG 5? Do you think we are progressing or we are not progressing? And tell us a little bit about your organization, Jane.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm going to be steady. My internet is a little bad, so just let me know if you cannot hear me clearly. My name is Jane Anyango. I'm from Kibera slums in Nairobi, Kenya, and I'm also part of the Safe City Network. Are we okay?
We can hear you.
Yes, so what we have been doing is that we have been mapping sexual harassment in public spaces and documenting and working with different task forces. Like we are part of the parliamentary task force, we are part of the county task force, just coming up with different policies to ensure that sexual harassment is reduced. So what is happening is that when we started mapping out the sexual harassment in public spaces, we have been working with children, and we've been able to work with them to develop safeguarding policies within the schools. We have also been able to mobilize different stakeholders to make sure that these spaces are safe. So if we are looking at SDG 5, and then we are talking about, to me, it's about engendering all the other sustainable development goals. And what is happening is that, yes, it has been given green light that so much is happening, that there's a lot of development that have taken place, but they are not clear on which indicators are doing well and the indicators that are not doing well. We have a lot of policies that have been developed. Yes, on development of policies, we are doing okay, but implementation of these policies, we still have gaps. We look at the grassroots because these are people who are like more of action oriented than the paper oriented. And in most countries or in most setups, we are looking at the policies that have been developed. So if the policies are not operationalized, then they are as good as nothing. So what I want to say is that let us look into how we are making, we are attaching or connecting the different targets or the different indicators to other SDGs. If we are looking at mapping sexual harassment in public spaces, we have been able to single out SDG 11 indicator number 7, where we are talking about lack of data. So if we don't have data, then how do we know that we are doing okay? We don't have data to know where we are starting from, where we are right now, or where we are going to 5, because it's about equity. It's about ensuring that each and every person is part of, especially the female fraternity, is part of the achievements that we are talking about on the sustainable development goals. Like if we're talking about harmful practices, then it has been, can we say, in my country, female genital mutilation has been medicalized. It has been modernized. So we still have so many things that are happening underneath. The people themselves have not owned the sustainable development goals. And that is why localization is very, very important. I'm part of the UNGA right now, and I know people are talking about localization. Let us take localization back into our community.
Gosh, I've been part of 3 whole days of localization talks. So I can tell you that
thank you so much.
I have shared with them how
are we good?
Yes, we are good. But how local the Safe City data is and how local the solutions are, because each of you really show us how you're using it in your own communities to reduce the violence. So over to you, Ruxandra. How are you doing it in Romania?
Hi, thank you. I would like to introduce myself a bit. My name is Ruxandra Sevastin. I'm a social worker and I'm the new partner. We are the new partner with the Red Dot Foundation, Sensiblu. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the foundation. The Sensiblu Foundation is an NGO here in Romania, established in 2002, and it promotes women's rights and gender equality. Furthermore, Sensiblu Foundation efforts and interest since the beginning of it was to put into making women's voice heard. For this statement to become possible, numerous projects were developed and implemented across the country. All these projects were accessible from different areas, whether it was in the private sector or in the public sector, to specialists and or beneficiaries. Following, I would like to name some of the most iconic projects, and I would like to ask Camila to put the links in the chat so you can all go and read more about them. So we have some projects that developed since 2020 that are linked to the Safe City. And I thought it would be really important for them to be pointed out. We have tech-wise, risk-free, sensitive response to domestic violence cases, love message, care, provision of specialized support and service to GBV survivors, and of course we have Safe City. Having the chance to integrate Safe City here in Romania into our projects was seen as a significant help in helping us making refugees that flee from Ukraine see how to navigate safely in the cities of Romania, how to understand better that they are not alone, and if someone pushes the limits, they can always find a safety tip or a good advice just by clicking on the platform or consulting the application. We wanted for them to understand that their experiences are not taken for granted just to be pointed out or to be numbered or to be counted, that their experiences have voices. We always do support groups and socialization groups, and we always discuss these problems with them. We're trying to explain them also from the legal point, what's happening to them, what they're going through, and how can they be solved, because they came from Ukraine with a different type of mindset that in some points is closer to us, but at some points is really far away from us. And the thing that you need to know is that the women back there in Ukraine are not being respected. And here in Romania, we're trying to make them understand that the situation is different and they have a voice, they have powers, they have rights, and they need to take these things back home with them once the war is over. So all the numbers we have until now on the Safe City app, and because of the Safe City app, are not something we're proud of, because we're always saying that our country is a safe country and they're welcome here. But when I see that our map is becoming more and more red each day, that's that things makes me think that we need to do something, that the authorities need to do something, and we need much strong laws here in Romania.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Ruxandra. So we've spoken about the problem and we've also said that not much is being done. But I want to ask you, to switch a little bit and give us a little more hope. Can you share one good practice from your work on how we can end violence against women and girls, but also accelerate SDG 5? Bojan, let's start with you.
Yeah, I think it's easy to talk about the problems, and I think we're quite adept at doing that, particularly when we sit at a think tank and we look at data or we're trying to make sense of the data that is existent, and there isn't a whole lot, as it was pointed out by some of our other speakers. No, I think we do need to strike a positive tone. I do want to just acknowledge also it is September 21st here, right? And it is International Peace Day. So of all the days when we should be thinking about the solutions and how to reduce violence in homes and in our streets, it should be today. I'll go into a few specific examples very quickly, but I do want to say, I do want to put different interventions that have been taking place during the pandemic to prevent and reduce violence against women into 5 buckets, because that's one of the things that we've seen in different parts of the world, particularly on the city action. Again, there's been work done on the national government side, but I do want to focus here on the city level and the local level, because ElsaMarie, you were talking, here in New York, the big focus these days is on localization and making sure that rubber hits the road when it comes to the SDG implementation. But anyway, so we've seen kind of 5 threads of what's been happening on these issues. And we've seen that quite a few cities have invested in strengthening and adopting their response and protection systems. This has taken many forms. We all heard about different hotlines that we put out there, the use of technology and WhatsApp to distribute different messages about resources that exist, but also to use it as a reporting tool as well. We've seen the expansion of community-based referral mechanisms as well, sometimes relying on religious and faith leaders to assist in the reporting. And that's been quite exciting to utilize really whole of society and whole of community approach. In the other bucket, we've seen quite a few cities adopting justice and law enforcement interventions. So in places where they have the authority, there's been expansion of protection orders. There's been some adjustments to the legal system to allow for remote assistance for violence against women victims to report or to deal with their cases through the legal process. And again, sometimes that takes place on a local level with their authorities. Other times it's more on the national levels. But we've seen that they can also be flexible, that some of these legal court systems that you think of old and stuffy, they can change as well. Then the third bucket, the third thread of things that we've been seeing has been raising awareness. And as I was mentioning earlier, all around the world, there has been a concerted effort by the media, by the local elected officials, by the civil society to really spotlight the problem of violence against women. They've invested in different campaigns. There has been pledges made by mayors, by national leaders who said, we need to make an investment in this issue. And that's been exciting. It's oftentimes the easiest thing to do as well, right? To put out a pledge and make a commitment, but not necessarily follow up, but it is important. We've also seen the other 2 threads, and I'm not going to go too many details into it, but we've seen that there's been efforts to control environmental factors that might contribute to exacerbate violence against women. So here we're talking about different campaigns that have been put in place in different initiatives to, for example, raise awareness about the risk of having a gun in home and how it changes the power balance within home, to spotlight the problem of femicides as well. And that's been quite encouraging to see that there is a broader view that there are all these other factors that are contributing to the increase of violence against women. And then the fifth thread that we've been seeing, there's been consideration of different forms of violence against women beyond just intimate partner violence. So there has been more spotlight on the issues of safety in the transportation. There's been more spotlight on the online abuse that's taking place, because today you're no longer safe on the street, you're no longer safe in your home, but you're also no longer safe online. And different messages that women particularly are getting online, especially if they're women journalists, women elected officials. That's one of the threads of research that we're pursuing right now, to see the amount of attacks and hate that local elected women officials are suffering under, and as a result are being discouraged from entering into public office. So we're talking about women being in leadership positions, but the amount of pressure they experience once they're even a candidate for that leadership position has been tremendous. So let me stop there. I know I didn't necessarily go into specific details, but I hope this gives you a little bit of a sampling in terms of what's been done around the world. And I'll put in the chat box as soon as I'm done a report that we have out that spotlights different examples in each of these categories, where you can do a deeper dive.
I also want you to share this one example, because one of the learning sessions I attended, the mayor of Oakland was talking about how when they receive a call of violence, the police go there, but they are accompanied by somebody who's a gender advocate or something, right? And that person really helps the police person to also de-escalate the situation from a gender lens. Can you share a little bit more? Because I found that fascinating.
Absolutely. It's great. And so this is the city of Oakland in California, and they have been known historically to deal with high levels of urban violence problems, and it takes many forms: crime, gangs, homicides, etc. And obviously that has an impact also. It has a gender element to it, and they're experiencing high levels of violence against women. So one of the things that they've done, and it's quite a innovative way that they've gone around it, they've created a unit for violence prevention. They've appointed a chief for violence prevention, kind of mirroring the police chief that they would have in the cities. They would also have a chief for violence prevention. So they had a centralized office that whose job it is on a daily basis to think about how to bring levels of violence down. In that unit, they also have a department that deals with gender-based violence. And one of the ways that they've funded some of their programming is they've actually made violence against women, gender-based violence, a public issue. So they managed in one of their local referendums to put a question whether locals support a tax. I forget whether it was the parking fees or something along those lines. And they've used that funding. So the community has come together, said, this is an issue, we want to make investment. We'll pay more on these fees or on these taxes. And they use that money to invest in quite a comprehensive program of response to gender-based violence. And ElsaMarie, I mean, you've done a great job of summarizing what it really entails. They do acknowledge when there is an instance of violence in the community or violence in home, it's not just the police who are responding. It is also somebody who is trained in gender-based violence prevention and providing the support in referring to the resources that exist out there. And it really changes the dynamic once an incident occurs, that you're offered with a wraparound set of services that you can access, that you can be directed to, versus having to figure it out yourself.
Thanks for sharing that. And maybe more cities can adopt that approach as well. Maya, can you share a little bit on some of the good practices that you have used or noticed that have come up in your work?
Yeah, thank you. So just to make it very briefly in the interest of time, also I've mentioned a few already earlier. But I'd like also to harp on the whole community approach in terms of, well, Bayi works really with women mayors, councilors, etc. But we wanted also a whole government approach in terms of addressing gender-based violence. For example, when we have we now also want to institutionalize the promotion of Safe City app and other policies with other department and agencies. So currently we're in talks with the transport sector. We're also in talks with the Interior Local Government Department. These are on legal reforms and policy reforms, but also we know that when we address gender-based violence, for example, in the experience of Barangay UP, we also know that, as you've mentioned earlier, many do not even know that that it was also already violence against women, or that they were able to commit already violence against women or girls. So education is very important. We have curriculum in our formal education that explicitly talks about stereotypes or promote stereotypes and double standards. So that is something that we need to address also. But also we also have education in terms of community education. That is what we do at the barangay level. And then it's important also to provide counseling services, survivor-centered counseling services, which the Barangay UP has also institutionalized. And upon getting reports, immediately there are interventions in terms of counseling and education activities in particular areas wherein there are reports of commission of VOW or GBV. We also would want to share that one of the probably good practice that we have is we engage young men to popularize and promote Safe City app. So they are part of the conversation and they are part of the solution. So we have really we have brilliant young men who are volunteers in the Safe City project that we have in the Philippines. Third, I think it's very important to have the collaboration organization. So it's COME, COME, organization, mobilization, and engagement of all sectors and of all departments, agencies, and advocates. We have to have a strategic approach, harmonized strategic approach in addressing GBV.
What about, having a data mindset at the barangay level or the local government level, to respond to violence? Because when I came to your city and we visited one of the offices, they had this big board by months and the type of violence, but they had color coded numbers. And when I started to say, okay, but why in this month you have this kind of violence at a peak and not this other kind, they suddenly started to think about it, right? But it's not like there is an elementary data driven approach, but we need to deep dive and really help them think about it. Can you share a little bit more about, what you're doing on that front?
Yeah, so thank you for also raising that. So yeah, when you came to barangay, and when we didn't have the Safe City app, we just treat data as data. We have these number of cases, but we do not delve into like what forms of violence, what time it's happening, what part of the year it's happening. So when the conversation came, when Elsa was here and there was a conversation on that one, gradually our volunteers slowly has picked up and maybe reflected on what are the reasons, for examples, in terms of why this violence happened. So for example, there was a huge increase after Christmas season, right, Elsa? And that during the increase, the volunteers have discussed and came up that during Christmas season, there's like a lot of drinking. There is also spending, which also make it, men, for example, in the urban poor community, make them more insecure. And then there's a spike of increase of violence against women. Of course, we have to do further research, but this is something that we can start on, like getting trends and patterns in the data that we've collected.
Thanks,
So,
Ma.
yeah, go ahead. It's
I
okay.
know there was also an increase in reporting in March, which is Women's Month, where you generally talk about these issues. So I found it very fascinating, and helping them think about evidence when doing the work was so critical. But we don't do that consciously. I want to turn to Jane, because Jane, Bojan mentioned engagement of a variety of stakeholders, and I think Jane has done it best. So Jane, can you share a few good practices that you have employed in your work? Jane, you have to unmute yourself if you're on mute. Okay, we lost Jane. So maybe we turn to Ruxandra in the meantime.
Okay. So along the years, the foundation got to be known for the project named Sensiblu. This is how we know it's about Sensiblu here in Romania. The work done by specialists help women to get the right psychosocial support, juridical support, referrals according to their needs. Some of them need to go to get medical support, and because of this specialist, they know where to get and how to get it. In order to make a difference, to change the mindset, because I already said this is really important for us in Romania, of those who are working with the beneficiaries in GBV cases, the foundation offers workshops, seminars, creates materials like integrating a trauma-centric approach into domestic violence intervention, accessible to all types of workers, especially for social workers, psychologists, police officers. The aiming of these activities is to develop and shape their skills into how to correctly approach the victim, how to correctly understand the case, and to write the next steps in order to protect the victim. And furthermore, in the light of the pressing situation, because working with the refugees here in Romania, refugees from Ukraine, is really important to us, the Safe City platform has been accessible to women from Ukraine too. offering them a crucial tool to report, as stated before, any instances of violence they may encounter. The initiative aims to provide support and protection to the most vulnerable among the refugees population, promoting safety and well-being during their difficult journey to safety.
You're working very closely with the police. So can you share a little bit about how difficult or easy it is to engage the police, and what makes the police want to work with you on this topic?
First, they were not so sure how to approach this matter, because they didn't know so much things about the Ukrainian refugees. They thought that these women are just like us, but they saw that they didn't know anything about the Istanbul Convention. It was implemented last year in their country, and they're still trying to figure out what this thing is for them. They don't have a restriction order, and they had to explain them and even show them a paper how the restriction order is, and that it's possible for them to obtain this here in Romania against their husband, against their owner, against the landlord. They have these rights, and they need to be aware of them. It's easier for us to work with police women, because talking about gender-based violence and sexual violence, they're not so willing to speak up if a man is present. So we are always contacting women from the anti-traffic team, from the police team, from the medical units, and getting them to our support groups, to our awareness sessions, and make them speak and give a lot of explanations. It's surprisingly to see how many times the police has to explain what numbers need to be reached out if they are in danger, because they don't know that. How to approach a police because they're afraid. They are always saying that back home the police is somehow going hand in hand with the perpetrator. So for them, it's like breathing opportunity. It's something new for them, that here the police are willing to listen to them and provide help. And even if they don't have a translator, they're going to contact someone, they're going to call someone and give them the support they need. Yesterday, they find out that even women from the anti-traffic team are actively involved in protecting women from Ukraine. They told them a real case from Ukraine, where the anti-traffic team and the police intervened, how they helped that woman. They wanted to make sure that they understand that it's okay to approach the police, even if they are in public spaces, or just go inside the police station. Thank you.
With Sensiblu, we've kind of converted the Safe City app into Ukrainian as well, so that Ukrainian
Yes.
refugees and migrants can access the app. Thank you for sharing
Yes.
that, Ruxandra. It's very important to work with stakeholders like the police, and also handhold them, because often they are also overworked and underpaid, and maybe they don't have the knowledge and skills. So I'm going to ask Jane if she can just use her audio to share some of the work she's doing, because she's also working with several authorities, but also interesting stakeholders like religious leaders. She's used community radio to educate her community, on the violence that is occurring in different parts of Kibera. So maybe, Jane, do you want to try one time to open up your audio? Don't put on your video.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks so much, Elsa, and I'm really sorry about this connection. I've typed something on the chat, and what I can say is that for us to accelerate implementation of SDG 5, then we must give the structures that have been developed the legs to touch the ground, in form of resources, in form of collaboration, and in form of partnerships. And you've talked about partnerships. So we have, once we organize these platforms, we call them the Stakeholders Assembly, where we are able to bring different stakeholders together to discuss how to make their community safe. And with that, we have the religious leaders, we have the local administration, we have civil society organizations, just bringing everybody on board. What we have done successfully is also to accept that we have structures. You don't expect people at the grassroots level to understand the laws that are there, the policies that are there. But we have the pathways, we have developed pathways to ensure that the reporting is done, that they are also able to access justice when they have to access justice. And with also the publication that we have right now that we can use it in every space, showing the different forms like in graphic manner. And this one is from the Safe City app, where we are able to show the different graphics. And with that, everyone understands that they are either survivors or perpetrators when we are talking about sexual harassment. And in our context, we put the defilement and rape aside because yes, they are within the sexual harassment space. But now when we go the defilement rape way, then there are people who feel like, this is not our thing. I've never raped anybody. I don't think I'm going to be raped anytime, and I'm not going to defile anyone. But when we use harassment, then in one way or another, we have experienced it and we have been part of, or maybe at once in our, maybe there are people who are perpetrators already. So that's it. That is how we engage the local people. When we pin the creep, when we are able to pin the exact location where there is harassment, then we are able to use the local radio station to discuss that particular location and with the boys in that location so that they are able to understand what sexual harassment is and to just stop what they are doing. I know our strategies are very much local, and because we are also very, very local, at times we say that we connect the people with issues because at times most conversations are very high, and when they don't get to the ground, then we can't celebrate achieving the sustainable development goals. We are not supposed to leave anyone behind. Thank you.
Thanks, Jane. So we will take a couple of questions from the audience. I know Fabrice has already posted a question. Fabrice is from West Africa, the DRC in particular. He says, are there avenues for support of people who report cases, and can the police access data if they want to take action? I will start. So at Red Dot Foundation, we share the data with several commissioner of police offices in India. And the police commissioner of Mumbai has recently assigned an officer to look at the data. And what he's also done is around the city, he has weekly meetings where his top officers sit with the community. So they can even take the Safe City data and present to him. And in reality, they are trying to respond to community needs without having to make official complaints. With another police commissioner in north of India, he approached us to work on a violence reduction program, and we are starting that in October. And we are very excited because it is going to be a high decibel campaign in a couple of locations, and then we are going to measure whether it has made a difference or not. And for us, that's the first institutional partnership of such scale with a police commissioner's office. So we are very excited at Red Dot Foundation. But I'll pass it on to maybe Maya, Ruxandra, if they want to respond, Jane or Bojan. Yeah, Fabrice, you raised your hand as well. So do you want to add to the question?
Yeah, sure. I thank you so much. The reason why I wanted to voice this Elsa is because I'm really impressed. I downloaded the app right on the call, and I was really shocked to see the numbers around me. And my question is, I try to think from a girl who might feel vulnerable, for example. When you see the app, it's really intimidating, and you see the amount of red, for example, around it. So I'm wondering, for example, is there anything that can also be done, be it in advocacy to, so that it's not really something which is only scary as well for ladies or for people who might feel vulnerable and feel totally unsafe, but, use it rather as a tool for much more advocacy. And I asked as well about greening when it's so red like that. If I am the mayor of Nairobi or the governor, I will want to know, for example, my city is so red. How can I get rid of the red so that whoever sees the app is not scared? Is it like if I take the case to the court, you remove 2 red? Something in that regard.
Thanks, Fabrice. I'll answer that. So, yeah, I mean, the first step is to, it's very easy to wish that things don't happen. And in reality, nobody knows it's happening. So one is we want you to be alarmed that it's red and move you to action. But our new feature, which is coming up, is highlighting where there's action being taken, institutional action. So you will have green, but you'll have to go to a different tab to look at the green. We also have highlighted our partners on the app. So you know who's the partner in that country or that city so that you can also reach out to them. So that way we are trying to highlight institutional partnerships and that it's not just complaining on the app, but really using the action. Camilla is also working on a lot of case studies, visual case studies, so that people around the world don't need to always partner with Red Dot Foundation to get to reduce violence, but they can learn and be inspired from the various existing partnerships, how it has been done, and then they can employ it themselves. The only thing we ask is tell us how you've used it so that we can also amplify those good practices. But to your previous question, maybe Maya, Ruxandra, you want to share something?
So, well, for us, we've just started very recently, and we are still in talks with the security sector. We presented this in the transport sector, and one of the heads of the security sector was there, and he was very interested. So that is something that we want to follow through also. We're also in talk with the PNP, Philippine National Police, in one of the cities in northern Luzon. And they are also very interested. In Manila, for example, we have in the Philippines, we have the violence against women and children desks in the police stations. So these are the key people that would be very interested in the promotion of the application to also get more data in terms of addressing and doing interventions in each city or municipality.
Ruxandra?
Okay, I'm going after Maya. As I said before, the police are helping us by coming to our groups and explaining the laws, explaining the instruments they can use, and they're posting our social media things. They're always willing to help the refugees, and of course we're happy that they're coming with us to the university and try to teach students and professors as well about safe city and the importance, and not to focus on the red dots, just to try to understand that that's a safe space, that's a safe area where all the experience can be shared and they can use those datas in order to go further and ask for something to be done without people telling them what's happening, where is that thing, those things are happening, what kind of behaviors are happening. They can't do anything. They need something to be written. They need data, they need statistics in order to make the government do something. For instance, in the city I live, there is only one police patrol. So it's not that okay, to be honest with you, because a lot of refugees are here in Suceava from Romania, and we're really close to the border. We need a lot of police that that can intervene if something bad happens, if there are cases reported from our side or the refugees' side.
Thanks, Ruxandra. Thanks, Fabrice, for that question. Camilla, do you want to ask your question?
Sure. Thank you, Elsa. Thank you so much, Maya, Ruxandra, and Bojan for being here. Thank you so much, Fabrice, for your question. It's been wonderful to talk to you all. I know that Jane had to step out, but I know that her team is here as well. So thank you so much for sharing your experiences. And we talked a lot about institutions and police and involving institutions in gender-based violence. So my question for you is, if we had stricter laws and punishment, do you think the cases of GBV and sexual harassment would decrease? Why yes and why not?
Bojan, maybe you can go first.
I was having a little bit of an internet trouble. Would you mind repeating the question?
Sure, yes. So my question is, if we had stricter laws and punishments in place, do you think cases of gender-based violence and sexual harassment would decrease? And why yes or why not?
Oof, listen, having laws on the books is important, right? I think that's one of the prerequisites to make sure that you do have legal protections and the legal system. You can move the case through the legal systems. You're not re-victimized constantly. But at the same time, I would argue, and some of the interventions that we've seen have proven to be quite successful, are the interventions that entail early childhood or school-based interventions, right? So when you're investing in children and future generations who are coming up and changing their mindset of what is acceptable, what is not acceptable, when to speak out, what are the gender norms and standards in a society and how we want to live. And to me, that's been more encouraging and has proven to bear more results over the long run than just strict laws on the books. That's one thing. The other thing is that I haven't mentioned earlier, but I do want to spotlight as well. Majority, when we talk about gender-based violence, right? If we focus in, we'll see that the majority of violence that's taking place is violence against women. There is still that 1 or 2%, depending on which society you are, where it is against men or gender non-conforming people. I think that's one of the other important things that we should not forget. And there's been, and there should be, a lot of focus and attention on providing resources and help to women who are victims of gender-based violence or violence in homes or on the streets. But I think more and more we're seeing new interventions that are actually focusing on the source of the problem. And in 99% of the cases, the source of the problem are men. And there are encouraging programs that are working with men to really address the problem of toxic masculinities. And I think that's one of the areas where I would like to see further investment going down the line, versus not necessarily just investing in law, thinking that the stricter laws will solve the problem of gender-based violence.
Thanks, Bojan, for bringing that up. And I want to give a shout out to Michael Goldman here. He's from our Gender Alliance, which is a network of various German foundation members. And we have a working group, which is a Gender Lens Engaging Men. And would you like to share a little bit, Michael, on what you all do? As part of that, we put a spotlight on you without any advance notice, but I think it's unique.
Elsa, thank you. Of course, I'm happy to do that. I'm sorry because I was late. Reason just is that I'm just taking care of my 3 grandchildren, two granddaughters, 1 grandson, and and that was makes a little bit what Bojan mentioned before, to make sure with little girls that to educate them to become strong women. So that's where we work on. So what we are doing in our team every 2 weeks on Thursday is just discussing very individual accesses to the issue of gender violence. And if Elsa gives me the opportunity to mention one very individual point, I'm happy to do that. It's a very special one. Maybe only few of you are aware that currently we have in Munich, we have the Oktoberfest, which is the biggest beer festival all over the world. Within 2 weeks, 6 million visitors come. And believe me, these 6 million people, they drink a really lot of beer. And of course, that's an atmosphere where their sexual violence really happens. But today they brought it down. I just looked at the figures. Last year it was 55 reported cases, which is, I think, with 6 million visitors, not too much. Why did it go down so much? The reason, and that's I wanted to mention, the reason is just money. Because having a tent on the Oktoberfest for the owner of the tent, he makes a lot of money. He makes millions within these 2 weeks. So, and he has to make sure that violence doesn't take place there. And even if he puts one security guy at every table, then he has to do that. If he doesn't do it, he is just losing his license and he's losing a real lot of money. And I think between having the laws in the books, maybe economic pressure also can help to make life a little bit more secure for our women. So that's an actual part of what's going on here in Munich, and I give it back to Elsa. Thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Thank you for that example, Michael. So in addition to your individual exercises to address unconscious bias and take a more active role in creating safer spaces, you also said institutions can put an economic pressure to do the right thing. So thank you for that. And Ruxandra and Maya, very quickly, if you can respond to Camilla's question.
Okay. So I've always believed that certainty of punishment will, of course, decrease crimes and incidences of violence. But as Bojan has mentioned earlier, it's not the only solution. Like, for example, in the Philippines, you'd be overhauling a corrupt justice system, and I don't know how long that would take us to be able to do that. So really, I agree that it has to be we start early. Even women are sometimes complicit in perpetuating violence. And that's why for us in Bayi, for example, we just don't want women leaders, but we want women leaders who understand power structures, power relations, and able to change and transform these systems and be able to carry a women's agenda when they go in the decision-making spaces.
Thank you. And Ruxandra?
I will say the same thing. I'm okay with what Bojan and Maya said. If we have stricter laws, I saw in Romania that these things don't help. We can punish them, we can throw them behind bars, but that's not really helpful. We need to go to the basic. We need to teach the kids how to behave in kindergartens. For instance, it's not okay to go to your girl classmate and push her against the wall and hug her, because that's what gender-based violence is about, right? He's going to think that it's okay to do that even if he grows up. We need to, as Maya said, we need to teach and try to make women that are in power how to look at women that have no voice, that have no education, and represent their rights when they go to speak about women's rights, not just to be there for the photos, to be honest with you. So I think education is everything. Without education, we can't do anything. It's not just stricter laws, stricter punishments, just a number of years spent behind bars. We need education. We need those curriculums to be implemented in schools and not to be optional. If the parent is okay with the child attending that class, he will go. No, he needs to go there. He needs to teach that. He needs to understand what feminist is, what boy is, how these are going to interact at their age or when they're older, because that's how it starts, in my opinion.
Thank you. We unpacked a lot today, and we also, I think, gave a lot of solutions that are actually happening on the ground. And for that, I would like to thank Bojan, Maya, Jane, and Ruxandra, and everybody else for making this so interactive. This is the first of the 2 panels, so please join us next week with more Safe City partners, and also one government leader from Malaysia, same time next Thursday. In the meantime, enjoy International Day of Peace and think about how you can spread the peace in your own community and make the world a little better place for everyone. Thank you. Have a wonderful day, good evening, good day, and good morning to those from New York. Bye.
Be safe.